All right, so we have Jason Huggins and Jennifer Bevan. Jason joined Google in March of 2007 as a test engineer. Prior to Google, Jason worked at a software consultancy called ThoughtWorks for 6 years. While at ThoughtWorks, he and a team of thought workers created Selenium, the browser for automation. Well, you all know what Selenium is. Why did you put that in there? Jason graduated from the University of Notre Dame in South Bend, Indiana, with a major in management information systems. He currently lives in Mountain View with his family. Jason was actually born in New York City, but hasn't been back in a really, really long time. And he can't spell his son's name.
I misspelled it. I don't know why.
Jennifer is a software engineer in Google's test engineering group. What?
Never mind.
Oh. She received her PhD in software evolution from UC Santa Cruz in 2007 and is the creator of Kenyon, an open source repository data mining tool. She previously worked in the Radio Sciences Systems group at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and received her electrical engineering and computer science bachelor's degree from UC Berkeley. Jason and Jennifer were actually asked to do this talk like last week. Last Friday. So please extend a warm welcome to Jason and Jennifer.
Well, I'll be starting off. So essentially we're going to do, I'll talk in two parts here. I'm going to talk about an experience report from our use with Selenium RC, and then Jason will move on to the demo, which presumably will not break this time. So, as Patrick and Ellen were mentioning, a lot of this, the purpose of this conference is to share experiences and to talk about what we're doing. So, what we have is we took Selenium RC and we put it on a grid of machines, and in that process, through deployment and operation, we learned a lot of lessons at the level of testing this at the Google scale of tests, which is a very high level. Also, and then as I mentioned, the demo is Jason's going to demo the gridified, and that's his word, that's why I put his name next to it, version of Selenium RC for the masses. This uses Amazon's electronic compute cloud, just on a pay by your credit card level. So you don't have to have a lot of resources to start parallelizing your tests. And we'll talk a little bit about future directions. So a little bit of background, given what the other talks have already said, I'm going to skip over a lot of the Selenium RC part. But specifically, Selenium RC has not as much browser support as, say, the Selenium core. And this talk is specifically focused on our work with RC. We have other work on core, but we can discuss that offline. One key thing I would like to mention is that RC does support the injection of the, as Simon put it, large chunks of badly written JavaScript into the page. And actually, we use this for good purpose. What we did is, when we created this farm, not only do we take the Selenium RC test that people have, we also take not so badly written chunks of JS unit tests and use the same machines to run both types of tests. So this farm was created for a very specific purpose, and you might recognize this slide from Patrick's keynote. Essentially what we had is we had a lot of applications and products that already have some sort of a continuous test integration system that's triggered off of their change lists. So they already have a build that's going on. Their system, under test is already being built and deployed, and they also have their own monitoring. So what we do is we take care of everything that happens in between the running, when the tests get sent off and then the results get sent back. And essentially all we did is we just took the Selenium client interface and implemented our version of that then captures the commands, sends it over to our servers, which is basically multiplexing and monitoring. That talks to to a real client, a vanilla client that talks to the standard Selenium RC, and then that just takes the usual path off to the system under test. Results get sent back, and as far as the tests are concerned, it's the same test running on localhost or on the farm. So a couple of the usage statistics that we had, and I generated this yesterday, so I've got 5 points. This is the number of tests we've run on some of our configurations in the last 5 days. So Saturday, Sunday are the low numbers, and then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. As you can see, Firefox are our top configurations. We do have pre-selected configurations for this farm. If you want something a little bit different, we have other ways of doing this, but these are essentially pre-configured machines, which makes the problem of ensuring that you've got the right test environment a lot simpler. And then just in terms of what this allows our people to do, for example, the Gmail test, they've got one test suite that was taking over 40 minutes to run, and they essentially just did one thread per test, ran it against the farm, and it went to 3.5 minutes, which is the length of their longest test. So, we've heard a lot of wonderful things about Selenium and some not so wonderful things. Dealing with Selenium RC at this scale, we did find quite a few issues that we needed to fix. There were some variances in what the different browsers and operating systems will give you. We did find reliability issues, scalability issues, and then, of course, the tests are running into the limitations that RC itself has. Because Selenium has to operate within the context of a browser. So if the browser dies, then Selenium can't do anything about recovering the state on this. But any changes that we make to Selenium RC to support what we need, they are getting propagated back to the open source repository, because that way everyone else can benefit and not have to deal with the same issues we had. So I'm going to go over some of these issues, and if you've been seeing these in your own work, if you're with your own grids, the nice thing to keep in mind is all of these issues are either actively being addressed or have been addressed and just haven't been propagated out to the repository yet. So our top issue was just test isolation. We actually don't run these tests in individual virtual machines at this point. It's still a trade-off. You can have one test per machine, but then you have a little bit of overhead on the machines. And some browsers, you really don't need to do that. Firefox supports multiple tests at one time because you have individual profiles. IE, on the other hand, doesn't, especially IE6. And so what Selenium RC does is it modifies the registry settings in your WinXP box. And the problem with this is if you have multiple tests from different people coming in at the same time who say want to log into the same session as different users, you now have a cookie collision, basically. And this sort of a shared resource management was not done in RC proper. So we had two approaches. The easy one to implement was we just single-tracked all of the IE tests through all of our machines that had IE configurations. And it works, it's great, we'll deploy that. Individual virtual machines, we still have that on the table as an option, but that's not what we're doing at this time. In fact, what we'd like to do is work with the RC developers to really support fully interleaved tests with your state saved in between. Secondly, another difference is the way that the JavaScript is evaluated within the browser changes from one to the other. A lot of our tests will use the Chrome version of Firefox that essentially lets them bypass all of the security checks. I kind of understated it there. Whereas, IEHTA, it was sort of expected to do the same thing of bypassing the security checks, but it doesn't really do it the same way. So we had people who had tests that weren't thought to run on both that weren't. And in fact, given that IEHTA is still only experimentally supported by RC, we just haven't been able to support that level of testing with IE. So we've only deployed it with the version that doesn't do any security bypassing, IE Explorer. And essentially, through this experience, we learned that we can't just say, we support IE6, IE7 on these platforms. You have to also define what level of support that you have. You have to say tests that do this are fully supported. Tests that do something a little bit more complicated are moderately supported, and go from there. And building that into your test submission really helps, because then if you do have a set of tests, basic IE tests, they don't do anything fancy, you should just be able to run all those at the same time. And you can really optimize that way. So essentially, we did have our testers actually modify their tests a little bit to manage their own cookies a little bit more. And we do support IE to some extent, but we still can't get around the security checks. Reliability issues. So this is all about 0.9.2 and the pre-0.9.2 releases. This deadlock was not as pronounced in 0.9.1, However, the features from 0.9.2 are things that we need. So it's a problem, two evils right there. So we chose the 0.9.2, and we discovered this deadlock because we were running so many tests so fast that some percentage of our tests kept timing out when they really shouldn't have. What our testers are doing now is they have an automatic retry of any failed tests. And because you don't, every time you do a test, it can be run on a completely different machine, the same machine, we don't really know. But if it fails twice in a row, it is more likely to be a real failure. And you can actually extend that strategy out. You can do full, multiple configurations and do a voting system if we really wanted to. Right now, we're just doing a retry. And this deadlock is actually our top priority. And in fact, we do have a patch that just needs to get merged, and that will be the first thing we ship off to the open source repository. One other issues on the reliability front, it does have a memory leak, it does have a connection leak. They're not very fast. It's just that for the length of time and the number of tests that we run, we do see a growth in both types of leaks. And effectively, we first went with our defensive strategy, which was just, we'll restart it every so often. And that works. And it's not a great solution. However, we had a few other priorities that were more pressing at the time. And so we have our defensive strategy in place, but we will be working also to help search and destroy these leaks. Oh yeah, there was one more. Testing. Well, see, all of these issues that we found were in code that passed the regression suite. And so clearly we needed to add more tests to the regression suite. So as we do fixes, we are adding tests for our own code. We are adding tests for the code that was around the code that we changed. And all of these tests are getting pushed out to the repository as well. Yes, it takes about 20 minutes to run the regression suite right now. This would make it take longer, except for what Jason's going to demo in a little while. Scalability. Session identification. So the way Selenium RC does session identification right now is it takes a look at what time your start or your open new browser command arrived, and this actually wasn't a fine enough granularity for us. So we made a change for that, and pushed that out. We also were running into a problem where even on Firefox, which in theory supports multiple tests at one time, right around 5 or 6 concurrent tests running at the same time, we started getting some other odd, not exactly a deadlock, but some other odd timing issues. And so we talked to them about this, and there is sort of an unofficial assumption that this would always be run in a virtual machine. And so the tests don't really investigate what happens, in this model. And so we are considering both, really optimizing multiple tests on a real machine versus the virtual machine. And all of these changes, like I said, will get pushed out. Performance. I figured I was going to get asked about performance from some of the other talks. And of course you'd want to. It's actually not our priority. Because we're generally going with the massively parallel execution, we want to get that part working first. And then, we can do more performance optimizations on your tests, but sometimes it's your tests themselves that can be optimized, and sometimes it's Selenium RC, and you don't really know that it's RC's fault at that point. So just a couple other things, and it's a little bit detailed, but some of you, if you noticed you're talking about timeouts. Well, when we fixed the deadlock in our local version, we suddenly noticed that certain tests that were supposed to have a timeout of about 45 seconds, when the page wasn't available, it would test out in 4 seconds. And clearly that wasn't right. So we found that, fixed that, that's getting pushed. And then the second one, you tend to have, I don't know, after we ran it for about half an hour, we would have 40 browser sessions left open in certain cases, not all the time. And in a lot of cases, you would end up with it being because of the deadlock or being because the idea of what Selenium had of what the browser was doing, mismatched what it actually did. But there's also a few other paths, and we found those. So as you can see, a lot of this stuff you wouldn't necessarily hit either at an interactive level or at a mild scope. And in fact, we had deployed this and were running it for a couple of weeks before we really started hitting these problems. As we got more users, as we got more adoption, the stuff became very apparent. Oops. Well, that was us. Okay. So, of course, being lazy or just being human, a grid of these machines, you really don't want to have to ever go into a single machine and fix something. You don't ever want to have to go and click "Don't send this report," or get out of the Firefox, talkback mechanism. You never want to have to do this. However, because Selenium RC is constrained to run inside the browser, there are going to be certain classes of errors that it cannot, by nature, handle. And so you really do need to have some sort of out-of-band communication. And we have one method of doing this that is part of our next version of the farm, and essentially that will handle state management, some extra monitoring, and the ability to just kill things when you need to. And now I'm going to switch to Jason, who is there, and he's going to start on the demo.
How much time do I have? Is it? It's 11:45 now. When's lunch? Where's Alan? 12:30. Wow. Okay, I probably won't take that one. What was that? Okay. Oh, right. Okay. So this is amazing grasp of the obvious here, but a little quiz. Which one is faster? This one or this one? Right? Okay. So obviously this one. However, one of the interesting things about, you could call it anti-patterns of Selenium adoption, is everyone does this because this is easier than that. So what happens is people download Selenium, they have one test, then two, then three, they're like, yay, yay, and then 4, then 100, and then 4,000, and then they're like, dude, I've got 3 seconds of unit tests and 5 hours of Selenium tests. Selenium sucks. I'm like, well, no, it's actually a symptom of an architectural design, of this little, whoa, shoot. Get away from my slides. Anyway, so what you need to do is, put in the effort to, parallelize or gridify your tests. So, yeah, easier said than done. So, how do you add more servers? How do you get to this? How do you go from this to this? Well, you thank this guy. You send him a letter and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. He's Jeff Bezos, the creator of Amazon.com. And they went on a risk, or kind of went out on a limb last year. It's been around for a little bit less than a year. Created Amazon Web Services. So it's a whole family of other things, really crazy stuff, like Google Mechanical Turk. That's some really crazy stuff. But the two things I'll be showing is the EC2, the Elastic Compute Cloud, which on the fly gives you as many machines as you want. So you can go from one machine to 1 million if they let you. And the other thing is that it dovetails to another service called S3, something storage service. And what it does is you upload a virtual machine to their storage service, and then when you want to, so it's just gigabytes stored, 1.5 gigabytes stored on some machine somewhere, and then when I want to start up a new instance, it'll just go grab that instance and then start it up. Or actually, more correctly, grab an image and create an instance out of that. Right, so anyway, also a bit of a context. If last year I was nothing but a shill for Apple, because they just came out with the Intel Macs, and my whole little talk was about how Intel-based MacBooks are cool, because you could do Windows, Linux, and Mac testing all on one machine. So this year, I'm nothing but a shill for Amazon. So, but I never got a thank you note from Apple, but I don't know if that'll change this year. So what really, just kind of summarize, I can zoom in here maybe. They've made computing a true utility, just like, it looks like a phone bill or an electric bill. The key thing right here is I'm charged for, well, that's not really interesting because I only got charged 3 cents. And also, so it's 10 cents per hour of usage. So I created my account yesterday. This was as of like last night. So I owe them $2 now for 19 hours worth of usage. So that's kind of cool. So you're like, wow, holy crap, 10 cents an hour, that's dirt cheap. I'm going to grab a million machines. However, psychological effective pricing, it's actually about $74 per month if you ran them 100% all the time, every day of the month, which is actually probably about the right price of rack-spaced server, co-located, whatever. The interesting thing about this is that it's not one server all the time per month. It's CPU hours. You can take one server and do it the whole month, or you can take 500 servers and just use them for an hour. That might actually be a lot more useful for your build process when you're more interested in a 5-minute build than one server for a month. So that's kind of interesting. So time for a quick demo of this thing. All right, also just briefly, so yeah, the last minute kind of preparation for this, I created the account while other people were presenting yesterday. Went through Amazon's awesome getting started guide, so it actually is pretty useful. So I won't actually go over the steps of creating an account, doing all that stuff like that, because it pretty much was paint by number. And then also they've got another website. This is actually kind of an interesting thing, kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but there's this notion of public images out there. So some other people in the community, like they posted, some people have, I missed it. Someone's put a Ruby on Rails kind of instance out there. So you can kind of just clone that and boom, you're like 5 seconds from doing Ruby on Rails development. So it'd be really cool if, there'd be a Selenium instance out there. So if you want to do your own testing, boom, you just bring this online and you can have it then SSH back into your machine or into your network, and then you can start doing all kinds of fun stuff. So that's kind of a plug for their services there. So I've got 2 running instances now connecting to some machines somewhere on the globe. I don't know if they're in Seattle or wherever they may be. Let's see if I can get, sorry. I had made a little shortcut, so machine 1. Okay, so first of all, there's a couple of command line options that you have. You can describe, I'll clear this. Simplify my screen here. So first you can kind of just ask Amazon for a list of public images that are available. That's kind of complicated, so I'm going to simplify it. These are just the ones I've created in the last 24 hours. So my first version was GTAC Vanilla FC4. They give you, by default, a Fedora core. Someone in the community has kind of bootstrapped Ubuntu into a Fedora core and then made it Ubuntu. So I kind of was playing around with that. And then to get ready for this demo, I added a whole bunch of stuff, like being able to VNC into it to kind of see the remote desktop. And then I took a snapshot of that and then called that, rather creatively, Ubuntu image 2. So yeah, I probably won't remember what that was for. I'll have to watch the video, I guess, to remember. So let's see, there's a couple other commands that you can kind of see. So I've got stuff. So if I wanted to just be really crazy right now and put this in a little for loop, I could go, like a nice little one-liner in Python, run this particular command, this EC run instances. That's a reference back to this. That's kind of a handle to your instance. So this is my golden image. I could put that into here. I don't know if that shows up right there, and then just start up the server. And then about a minute later, it'll actually be running. So I'll show you the way to kind of pull that. I think also this is a command line interface. They also provide a SOAP API and a REST API through actual programming languages. You don't have to do it all through the command line. So this part in kind of the sizing, but the interesting thing is that you have, these are images, and then when you actually start them up, you have instances. So I have an instance ID here, an instance ID there. So I have 2 machines running on the Elastic Cloud, and this is the public IP address of that machine. And if I zoom out over here, sorry for the scrolling, but that is the internal address. So if you actually had a grid and you wanted to actually have all the machines just talk to themselves and not actually go out to the internet to do all their communication, this is an IP address that just the machines can use to talk to themselves behind their firewall. So depending on how you're going to be using their services, they provide these 2 IP addresses. So for my purposes, if I'm going to bring up my web app over here, I'm really only going to be interested in, well, I'm going to connect to it remotely, and then I'm going to have it connect back. So I didn't really do much with the internal IP addresses. Also, I can, just to show you, this is where, hopefully things don't fall down, but I'm going to SSH into one of the machines. They give you a public-private key. Wow, that was fast. Who am I? I'm root. And I'm this machine. That's the internal address. So you can do all kinds of stuff. So this is how I actually kind of bootstrap myself into kind of installing like a VNC server and GNOME and X Windows and stuff like that. You just do whatever apt-get stuff that you need, but you do it through your SSH shell console. And then when you're done, you actually take your instance ID and then you can just terminate it there, which I'm not going to do. So let's play around with Python really quick. And one of those instances, see if I can get this straight. Okay, so kind of lay it around here. It's just nothing but a GNOME desktop. Is it GNOME or GNOME? GNOME? GNOME. All right, GNOME. GNOME desktop. And I actually have a console version of Selenium RC just running there, not doing anything interesting, waiting for commands. So I'm going to use my scratchpad here. I've got a version of Python running, so I'm just going to give it some commands. So I'm going to import the Selenium library. I do not want to type this. So if I can get over there. Okay. All right, I created my Selenium object. The cool thing about things like Python and Ruby, that you can kind of get a list of all the commands. Selenium is kind of like the PHP of web testing applications, where WebDriver is simple. We've got one big, fat global namespace of commands. It kind of stinks. But, hey, PHP is pretty popular. So, all right. OK, so I'm going to actually start a session. And for my next trick, something will actually show up. Oh, let's see. Select that window. There we go. OK, watch the X window. Something's happening. So it says preparing Firefox file, launching Firefox. It's now starting it. And there you go. I'm now going to do a couple other commands. It's more kind of a house cleaning thing. This is going to maximize the window, hopefully. Actually, I'm just going to do this on the fly. We're going to open google.com. Let's see. Hopefully I've done this enough times so I can remember this. So I'm going to type, let's see, what is it, Q? And I'm going to say GTAC. And it types GTAC into the field. I'm going to say selenium.click. And the button, the Google search button is called button G. So I'm going to click that. And you get to the Greater Toledo Aquatic Club, or the Geospatial Training Application Center. Interesting stuff. And then when I'm done with my test, I could do some assertions, but I'm not going to, because I'm lazy. And I'm just going to stop the test. And then Selenium just goes back to listening mode. So it's kind of interesting. So that's kind of an interactive way of using Selenium remote control with a nice dynamic language like Python or Ruby. Sorry, Perl. I think it's really just, it's available in there. I think it's just a little bit harder to do it interactively. But anyway, so that's the, fun way to kind of play around with the service at first. Now I will, for my next trick, I will now do this same thing, but in this massive parallel grid system scaled out. Wow, cool. So I'll actually exit this session, and I'll kind of show you how I kind of cheated a little bit. So the way I would approach this problem, usually I would probably have a program that took all of my tests and created kind of one thread per test, and then through some kind of magic got, either polled the service for like the next available machine and kind of did a matching game between a matching game between the thread and an available machine and just, send it on its way. Just for, simplicity here, just proving the point you can do 2 tests at once. I just created 2 test files, test Google AWS1 and test Google AWS2. I'll just show you the first one. Bad programmer, I hard-coded IP addresses in here. But I'm going to show you the test. It's very similar to what I did. And this is using the Python's unit test harness. So in the setup, I'll actually create a Selenium object and start it. And then in my actual test, I will, can you see this, by the way? Wow, whoa, that's small. That's too big. Is that better? So yeah, very simple, just open, maximize the window. Set the speed, actually, that's kind of more for demo purposes. I'm just gonna slow it down. Don't actually have to do that for a real test. Again, I'm going to type hello world, click the button, wait for the page to load up to 5 seconds, and then otherwise it'll time out. And then just actually do an assert here saying hello world actually is the title. And then as a teardown, I will stop the test. So that is test 1, and that is pointing to one of my machines. And if you're live blogging, do not attack that machine, please, as I program. Let's see, and then test Google AWS2 is the same thing, pointing to a different one. And I'm really cheating here with some multi-threaded code. The way I'm actually going to be doing 2 tests at the same time. Oh, let's see, make this a little bit simpler. I am cheating. I'm adding a nice little ampersand after calling the script that launches it without kind of waiting for it to execute. So nice little Unix hack. So if you're asking if I'm going to be open sourcing the stuff that I'm showing today, there you go. Because actually it's just the test Google Python script that's already there. I modified it for an IP address and then did these 3 lines of code. So I can't possibly fathom how many lines of code that would have been if I had to do that in Java. So I will actually perform my trick if I can. Set up my screens here. Has to be set just right, because you'll see in a second. Okay, are you ready to ooh and ah? Ooh, very nice. Okay, so I've got the 3 actors in my little play, machine 1, machine 2, and my little Python console. So I'll go back here and launch that Python test Google Gridified. Go. Ooh. All right. This is the point where most demos crash and burn miserably. But I succeeded this year, so I do not get a copy from Alan. So machine 1, machine 2 are going. They're typing, hello world. They're getting results. They're asserting results. And they're quitting. Yay, a demo worked. I should just stop right now. So as you notice, the test ran and it took 20 seconds. So this is probably the point where you start saying, okay, let's come off a little high here. We just used a big grid, somebody's other machines. We did it all worked. But dude, it took 20 seconds to go to type hello world into Google. So there's some issues here. Well, one, I'm kind of going across the country, I think. I mean, maybe their servers are here. But there was time to start up the server. If you actually go all the way back and don't cheat like I did and actually do some kind of threading thing where you're actually going to bring online a server, you have to wait for that time. So there's all kind of implications. But so there's going to be kind of a trade-off point. If you only have 20 seconds of testing, if somehow magically, well, actually this is what, 20 plus 23. Well, okay, so here the thing is, it would have taken 43 seconds, but now I got a 50% increase or decrease in time, whatever. So that was pretty good. But there's a trade-off. There's so much overhead and keeping all these plates spinning that yeah, you'll have to kind of see where things work. But yeah, that's it. Also, the other I'm trying to think the other things about this is that it probably will get expensive if you do this all the time. So this happened to me last night. I think I brought some of these things on, but I fell asleep, and I'm still getting charged per hour. So you have to make sure that you add into your test, shut down the instance, so they don't grab more of your money, even though it's only another 10 cents or something like that, or 80 cents for an 8-hour sleep. But anyway, so that's pretty much my demo. I just want to do kind of a proof of concept. I was, in all best of intentions, was going to do it like over 500 machines just to see if I could do it. But Amazon, because the Elastic Cloud is technically in beta, I blindly clicked through the user license like everyone does. And it probably says somewhere in there that you can't just grab 500. Well, actually, that's the one thing that's explicit. For regular users, you can only bring up 20 instances online unless you email them for permission to bring online more. So I sent them an email last night saying, hey, I'm a guy at Google. I'm presenting at this conference. I want to have 500 machines. Will you let me do it? I didn't get a response back. So as I went to press, they did not write me back. So who knows? Maybe this weekend I'll get my request for 500 machines and we'll do this again. What was that? Yeah. So if they know someone at Amazon, send them a link to the YouTube video, and they'll say, poor Jason. All right. So that actually is my demo. I actually didn't know if it was going to be able to work because it was kind of like started exactly 24 hours ago. So that was it. I could do a whole bunch more complicated things. But I'll just kind of seed the audience with some questions here. So it comes up in everybody's talk. Are you going to open source this? So there's actually two parts that need to be open source. One thing, the thing that I did just now, you saw the 3 lines of code. And then all the other stuff, that's just Amazon stuff. So ask them. And then there's the other part of all of the Selenium Google grid stuff that you talked about. I'm sure you came up here to kind of give that part of the answer.
Right. So for the Google created Selenium farm, as we've been calling it, we very much want to open source it. When we initially built it, we did include some internal technology just to speed up our actual deploy time. And so we're really looking through like the best way exactly to take that out and what to put in to let us open source it. But that is, what we want to do. And as like Jason mentioned, the rest of it you just saw can replay on YouTube in slow motion.
I was like, oh.
Yeah.
And before I actually open up to other questions, second one, I know everyone has been chomping at the bit to ask this question. Who is Paul Hammett? So first of all, hi, Paul, on YouTube, right? So every time I talk about Selenium, Paul Hammett comes up to me and said, dude, you forgot to mention me again.
Does he say dude?
Yes, dude. Actually, that's his thing. Next time he's talking, dude. But he's British, so it's kind of odd, right? So actually, let me show the slide here. That is Paul Hammett. That actually was taken from his public profile on the thoughtworks.com page, so it's not like if it's embarrassing to him, it's his fault, right? But he is the creator of what is now remote control, but at the time it was called Selenium Driven. So some things like the DSL stuff, that was not using remote control, that was just using core. So I'm the creator of Selenium Core, and I'm not just the creator, there's a whole bunch of other people at ThoughtWorks that did that. But there was this big kind of ongoing architectural, philosophical kind of difference of how you do Selenium. So there's these two things, Selenium Core, and then when Paul saw the first demos of Core, he immediately saw, oh, it's great, but it sucks because you can't drive it from Java. So he wrote the Java drivers to Core, which was called Driven, and then it got rewritten by Nelson Spears, Dan Fabulich at BEA, and Patrick Lightbody, who's at Jive Software, and then he left. So I'm giving out all these kind of karma balancing kudos to other people. So all those other people made the remote control version of Selenium what it is. And so finally, to kind of correct past wrongs. Thank you, Paul. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know who threw that snowball in his face. So anyway, thank you, and openqa.org is where you can find Selenium. So that's it.
So I was curious about. All right, I'll just speak really loudly.
Or you can come up here. This one works. Yeah, wait, because with the video, well, I'd have to repeat your question.
It's a short question.
Or you could. I just will repeat your question if the mic doesn't work.
Let's try. Aha, there. Thank you. In running Selenium in a farm, do you always run one instance of the browser per instance of Selenium remote control?
With Firefox, I think we started with one instance of Selenium RC, and then as many instances of Firefox as it can handle. So that could, I don't know, at one point, would we get like a peak of like 20 or 30 or something like that before the wheels started falling off?
The wheels fell off. The wheels started falling off around 20 or so, but you can actually start noticing the wheels shaking around 5 or 6 right now. We're hoping to boost that number a lot.
But we did not do one server per one test.
Right.
But we are planning, or it's one of the options of doing one virtual machine, which then does one Selenium server, which then does one test, because then your ability to reason about failures is you have more ability, I guess. When things go multi-threaded, it's harder.
Although, as I mentioned, for IE, we do actually single track the tests for other reasons. Yeah.
So what are you doing? Obviously, I don't know if you guys are using Windows at all for the instances, but if you want to test on IE, what are you doing about the Windows licenses? Do you have to get a license for each instance of the VM, or and spawn it up, or are you?
Well, so for our version, we're not actually using VMs. So we have just official installs. That is one of the issues, if we go to a virtualization model that we'll have to deal with. Now, I don't know what Amazon's theory is on that.
So yeah, I didn't give enough attention to the trade-offs with the Amazon model. Of course, that's only Firefox and I guess potentially Conqueror, depending on how you set it up on Linux on an open source thing. So it's potentially just a matter of sending money to Microsoft to install and VMware, I guess, or Zen, if you can get that for free or get that working, and putting Windows on their grid. I'm sure they wouldn't be too happy with that, but it's a simple matter of money. With Apple, it's quite not legal. So those are the trade-offs there. I mean, well, yeah, it's possible, but not legal. I don't know if it's possible, but I've heard rumors, right?
You were a fanboy last year.
Right. So yeah, that's the big thing of, you scale out on this particular thing. But on the grid at Google, where we have all the machines, and it's right. And one other kind of clarification. I don't know if this is like old news to people, but there was kind of some FUD around Vista's licensing scheme, specifically around virtual machines. They clarified it, but then they kind of made it fuzzier. And I guess that what it comes down to is you can't use the exact same instance license copy of your host and use that in the inside the client. What do you call it? The virtual machine. I think some people were thinking, Vista is not allowed to be run inside of virtual machines, or Vista Consumer or something like that. So you have to go get the
Premium.
platinum-plated enterprise version to be able to do that. That's not true. They clarified it in a really ambiguous way, saying they actually give you more rights, that you can actually take one license and use that in many different ways. But I'll make it sound more. Yeah, I guess it's a tough thing. I can't even make it straight, right?
So you're saying if I had a license on a VM, hypothetically, I could bring it up, and as long as I don't have that same license on another VM at the same time, I can continue to
Potentially.
use that one.
But
That seems like what they're going for.
since I flew through the user license agreement with the Elastic Cloud, I have no idea if I'm breaking the law if I did that. So I would assume I would be if so. Yeah, I'd probably want a written letter from Bill Gates that I could do that on Amazon services. And also, we don't use the Elastic Cloud inside Google. Right.
You mentioned about memory leaks in Selenium RC and how you're working around them by restarting. Can you give me an idea how often you restart, or is there a certain number of tests, or?
Well, actually, what we did is we made the assumption that n-1 was fairly close to n when n was large. And so since our n is large enough to do this, we actually just cycle through continuously. So we always have n-1 machines up. And then one of them is getting its tests drained off. Those all finish, we restart it, then we add it back.
Okay.
Yeah, and generally, we could probably do some extra, fancy stuff, putting them into subpools, cycling through those. So far, we haven't needed to, and we are really hoping to actually fix them before that becomes necessary.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about you restart it after like a given set, not in the middle of running a set?
Oh, no, definitely let the tests finish that had already started. And then we just don't send any new test requests off to that machine until it's done processing its set, gets restarted, and then we open it up for more tests after that.
Okay, thank you.
There you go.
Hi. I'm wondering about your use of the Chrome browser. Do you always use Chrome, or do you only use Chrome in the instances where what you're trying to test is not testable using Firefox?
Actually, just because the Selenium RC support for Chrome is so good, we just use Chrome because effectively it's a superset. Now, if someone specifically wanted to test some of the stuff that Chrome bypasses, we could certainly set up a configuration for that. We don't have it as one of our current ones, but there's nothing that would keep us from doing that.
I'm just wondering if there are any elevated privileges that are available to Chrome which misrepresent what's available to Firefox.
I'll take this. Well, the thing is, the same origin policy trips up everyone all the time,
Right.
everywhere, because you think a user can just go to one site and then click a button and go to the next one, but they don't realize Selenium is, because it's implemented in JavaScript, is subject to the same origin policy. You can't just go from, evilhacker.com to chase.com and transfer things back and forth. So as far as testing is concerned, if you go with the philosophical kind of idea that you are doing what the user is doing, you don't want the security there, because a user is not limited from going from site to site. So it's a bug for your testing tool to have a limitation that a human being does not. But so I would actually say that Chrome, whatever the asterisk Chrome mode, that we should just string replace when you start at Firefox, it just should be in Chrome mode. And then we should then call Chrome mode like secure lockdown mode or something like that. Because if you really want to test that, you couldn't have a program type a file upload thing. But I think you might want a different tool for that. So Chrome is great because there's just no security. There are other workarounds for IE and Safari. There's a thing it's really experimental, called proxy injection. And then there's also some really crazy stuff for SSL support, and it's working, but sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. At least for the apps that I'm trying to point it at. So I think the future of Selenium RC would be more like an elevated privilege kind of mode into the browser, like native code, kind of like the WebDriver is doing. We're actually driving it natively. The downside to that, the native approach, is that you have to get more in bed with the native code. So you have to write C# or C++ for IE, you have to write Objective-C or AppleScript for Safari. Firefox is effectively its own platform. It's a complete black box, any platform it sits on. So you can't use Win32 or AppleScript or whatever. You have to program to the Firefox platform. So that's why you have to do crazy stuff like telnetting into it, because the operating system, as far as it's concerned, it's like another virtual machine, kind of like really crazy stuff. So Selenium kind of solved 80% of the problem with its just simple like the JavaScript implemented version, but I made this answer way too long than it needed to be. But yeah, the security issues are that last. It was a trade-off. Simplicity of implementation, do a JavaScript everywhere, but you lose the ability to do anything everywhere. So eventually we'll be going down to more native, closer to the browser internals approach.
Thanks. Could I ask a couple more quick ones?
Who is it?
Do you always close the browser after the test, or do you sometimes return it to some kind of neutral state and start from there? Because I know that the browser startup time is a significant part of the test runtime.
I've seen both. It kind of depends on what you do. I've seen some places where they keep it up, and then tunnel a whole bunch of tests inside of it, and then after like maybe 10 minutes, they'll just shut it down. But I think most people are just going to keep it so you can reason about failures. Every test assumes a startup, like a launch and a shutdown. If you do it in a massive grid, hopefully that startup time isn't so huge. But I don't know if you have a take on that.
Essentially, that's in the control of the test. If the test sends a stop command, then it shuts down the browser. So it's actually well before we actually, the actual grid gets involved. So we actually let the test make that decision for themselves.
But there's an interesting side effect to that. If the test writer, who's not, you're looking at the grid, but if that test writer forgot to say selenium.stop, you now have a machine start percolating extra copies of the.
At which point we shut them down after a while when they've been inactive.
Right. Or it's a nice side effect of restarting Selenium server anyway, because when you stop the server, all the browsers that were attached to it disappear.
So I do have a question about putting the whole thing on the grid. So obviously, parallelization will help me if I can split my original task into independent subtasks. Now, if I'm testing a web-based application, probably all the clients are more or less independent, but they are still talking to the same server. And in each test case, I expect to find the server in a given state when I start my test case. Now, these test cases executed in parallel might have some side effects on the success of each other that I really don't like. Do you suggest also to run a separate web server for each of these applications?
If you go through the little getting started guide on the Amazon, they say that you don't have to have just one type of a machine, like a Selenium thing. You could have two types. So I can imagine if you want a really, thin slice through your stack, where you could bring up an instance that's nothing but a MySQL server, another one that's nothing but a web server, and then another one that's nothing but a test harness to those other two, and then have, so anytime you're actually doing one test, you've actually got three instances all just talking amongst themselves. But I mean, it's one of those things of all of that is a simple matter of programming. I did not solve that problem. You'll have to solve it. So really, this is just an advertisement for the possibilities that you now, as a just regular programmer on the streets, you can have access to a really super powerful grid. But it'll be up to you as far as figuring out what the best design strategy is for isolating your tests properly.
The question is probably this: it seems to be pretty tempting to solve a problem that what I am doing is done not in the most efficient way by throwing more resources at it instead of solving the actual problem.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm guilty as charged for just throwing more crap at it and seeing what happens. So
there is feedback on your credit card account, of course.
So I have a follow-up to that, actually, is that I think that to parallelize your test cases, you're always going to do things in the non-most efficient way. So the question of opening and closing the browser, so opening the browser and closing the browser every time takes longer, but doing that can isolate your test cases to where they can be individually run across different machines, and you actually end up being faster. So if you look at just the design of the one test case, you may say, well, why do you do this every time? There's a startup overhead involved, but it allows 150 tests, each run in their own thread and finish in 5 minutes, as opposed to running sequentially and taking 2 hours on the machine. So I think that there is a most efficient trade-off to actually make use of the ability to have multiple software that ends up making the end result much faster.
Right. This is also part of a complete balanced breakfast. And the most efficient thing is to never write a Selenium test.
I say there's efficient in the global sense and in the full system sense. In general, what we do see is for the tests that tend to take a very, very short amount of time, we get more of the behavior of one browser session, a whole bunch of stuff. Like our JS unit tests tend to run that way. And then you would shut it down. Whereas if you're doing any actual application level testing, you tend to take Julie's approach and you just go ahead and you pay the extra upfront cost.
A lot of questions.
One more.
I'll just talk. Jason, does Amazon let you control where the servers are physically? Can I cause a server in London to run my test and a server from Hong Kong to run my test? Do they give you any control of
Yeah,
that?
ask the question so I don't have to repeat it. Even though I heard you.
You didn't hear me?
No, I heard you.
Okay.
Okay, I'll repeat it.
Okay. All right.
So can you control, it's for the...
Can you control the physical location of the nodes in that parallelization? I think in a lot of financial systems, what you'd like to do is to create load from Tokyo, from Hong Kong, from London, from Paris, from wherever. And I'm just curious if they give you any control over that.
So my quick answer is I don't know.
Okay.
But my second answer is one of the core developers of Selenium RC, Patrick Lightbody, he quit his job at Jive Software, started a company called Auto-Originate, which was effectively hosted Selenium testing. Not too long ago, 6 months ago or so, he got acquired by a company called Gomez, and they do exactly that. So you can say, run a test from Australia, from behind the Great Wall of China, maybe, from Tokyo, from London, and you can write, I think they kind of abstracted way, but yeah, you effectively can write a Selenium test. So there are actually some trade-offs here. You can do all of this kind of stuff on your own on Amazon's grid. You don't know exactly where it is. They might actually be able to tell it. Maybe we could do a trace route and actually find where it came from. I don't know if you could tell it to go somewhere, but you would definitely, if that's your critical thing that you would want, go talk to Patrick Lightbody at Gomez, and he'll be able to hook you up, I think. Sorry, yet another plug for another company.
Show for everyone.
Right. I'm an equal opportunity shiller.
All right, are there any more questions?
I think we're done.
All right, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.